Good morning. So I just wanted to start off by telling you a little bit about the background of what we do and how I came to be involved in this work, and to really encourage you to look at what you can do on a local level to impact abortion in your own area and throughout the country, but starting at the local level, and to really encourage you all to be involved on that level and to try and say a little about how that can impact the abortion law and society in general. The work that we do, my son really wanted me to call this talk Prayer Wars, A New Hope. That got slightly altered. I just had to mention that. He was very insistent that's what it should be called. But prayer is a big focus of what we do, and for those of you who have any faith, I would say don't be tempted in any way to leave your faith at the door in the work that you get involved in. I think one of the most depressing things I see is Christians and other religious people getting involved in pro-life work and trying to kind of pretend that they're secular people or something. I don't know. I think it's very important to bring our faith into our work, and whatever your faith is, prayer has been really, really important in the work that we do and really effective. So this work that I'm involved in started originally in America, where in Hawaii, I think, there was a kind of a testing period for abortion, where abortion became legal for a trial period to see how it would work out before the abortion law was passed through the rest of the states. And at this time, a guy called Robert Pearson set out to try and reach women who were abortion-minded. Women had to come to Hawaii and be resident there for 90 days to get an abortion, because they didn't really they didn't want people coming there. That was the point of it. They wanted to experiment on the population living in Hawaii. But of course, wealthier women, or women who had access to cheap travel, air hostesses particularly, would fly out there and stay there for their 90 days to get their abortion. Now, Rob Pearson was trying to reach these women and trying to offer them help and trying to prevent abortion becoming a bigger and bigger thing in Hawaii. So the first thing he did was he started advertising, "Pregnant, worried, we can help you." And they got a call once in a while, and one or two women came to them and they helped them, and life went on. But he realised that there were hundreds of women coming to Hawaii and they just weren't reaching them. So they tried several different ways of advertising to reach these women. And finally they found that when they advertised, considering abortion, need a hotel to stay in for your 90-day stay in Hawaii, suddenly they started getting calls and calls and calls, and the phone was jumping all the time. So they found for every one call they got on the line that said, "Pregnant, worried, we can help you," they'd get about 100 calls when they said, "Considering abortion, come and stay here, we can help you." So they started seeing girls who were coming to stay for 90 days in Hawaii, and then they would have 90 days to spend with these girls, offering them help, support, alternatives, encouraging them to keep their baby, and helping them in every way to choose life. And of course, they managed to see many, many women turn around. More and more women were changing their mind and keeping their baby, and suddenly they found they'd hit upon something, and they were reaching hundreds of women and helping them to choose life for their children instead of abortion. So when Roe versus Wade happened in 1972, Robert Pearson decided to take what he had learned to America and try and spread the news there. In the same way, they found that when they set up crisis pregnancy centres and said, "Pregnant, worried, we can help you," they would get a small number of calls, and women who really wanted help to keep their baby would approach them looking for help. But when they said, "Considering abortion, ring this number," suddenly, again, they found that they had hundreds of women calling them looking for help because they felt that abortion was their only option. And it's something that to this day remains true. I think you'll find that pregnancy centres throughout the country are finding it harder and harder to reach women, and more women are just going straight to the abortion. In England particularly, we have an issue where, because most abortions are done free now through the NHS, even if they're done in private clinics, they're paid for by the NHS, that there has been this huge swamping of women with information. I mean, a woman can get an abortion so fast it would make your head spin, but most women only need to contact their doctor, or even they can walk into clinics and book an abortion immediately. So they're often not even looking out there to find a centre to go to before they even, within minutes of finding out they're pregnant, if they ring their GP, they can have a hotline number to one of the abortion clinics and book their abortion. So it's really, really hard to reach women who are looking for abortion in this country already, but we know that offering help to women who want to keep their baby is going to reach a small number of women and not the most vulnerable women to abortion. So we've taken on this work. It's spread throughout Europe, spread to Ireland from a big centre in Chicago that took it on, a Catholic centre that made it into a huge work. They see 2,500, they save 2,500 babies a year on average, and they've spread the work throughout Europe and across the world, really. We were actually recruited by a group in Ireland who were doing the work there, and we've continued to take on the same approach. So our adverts will often say, considering abortion, ring this number. And we also look for other ways to meet the abortion-minded woman where she is and reach out to her. And in fact, I can say that, even with that approach, it's very, very hard these days in the UK to target very abortion-minded women with your advertising and reach them. And a centre like ours would see maybe 2 or 3 girls, up to 6 or 7 girls a week, each week during the year. But I can say that there's a very small number of centres that would see anything like that. And in fact, if you can find me a centre that's seeing as many girls as we're seeing who are considering abortion, I'll happily give £50 to anybody in this room who can find another centre seeing that many girls. I don't think I'll lose that £50 because the outreach is really... We've gotten very nervous about reaching the woman who's set on abortion, and most of the effort is concentrated on reaching women who have difficulties but want help to keep their baby, which I'm not saying isn't an important mission, but we as pro-life people must make an effort to reach the women who are really, really set on abortion. So if I just go into the work we actually do, our mission statement is, through and with Mary, the mediatrix of all graces, to mediate the mission of motherhood in order to save as many babies as possible from abortion using the most effective, morally acceptable means to reach, inform and help their mothers. We talk about Our Lady because basically we believe that Christ used Mary as the means to approach humanity, and therefore she must be the most effective and the most efficient means. Frank Duff, who founded the Legion of Mary, said, "Without the Marian element, it is possible to act prayerfully and energetically, and yet to accomplish nothing of worth. For Our Lady is part of the principle of fruitfulness. Our Lord does not please to be fruitful by himself. He did not come on earth without Mary. Likewise, he insists on her action as the condition of his revolutionary entry into souls. Without Mary, accordingly, the greatest strivings will only end in sterility. With her, on the other hand, every effort brings about its due fruit, while heroic acts effect the miraculous." So every part of our mission statement is important. We work through Mary. We aim to mediate the mission of motherhood to the women we see because they have been given a mission to be a mother. They can exercise that in a number of different legitimate ways. They can have their baby and give the baby up for adoption. They can have the baby and care for the baby themselves. We don't believe that abortion could ever be a legitimate means of exercising that mission of motherhood, and that also, for their own fulfillment and for their own salvation in time, the way they deal with this mission of motherhood is very, very important. And in fact, it's something you often see in women who've had an abortion, that somewhere they have to resolve that mission of being a mother. And in fact, one of the great blessings for women who have any spiritual belief is that they can still take on that spiritual motherhood of their child and look forward to being reunited with that child at the end of their life. So what are the reasons why women abort? Well, 95% of those who come to us approach us looking for an abortion, but after counselling, about 7 out of 10 of them will keep their baby. It's been said that no woman wants an abortion like they may want an ice cream or a Porsche. A woman wants an abortion the way a fox caught in a trap wants to gnaw off its own leg. And I think that's something we see very much in the work that we do. Women are often put under pressure by other people to have an abortion, but it's very rarely something the woman really wants to choose for herself. The first and most important reason why women consider an abortion is contraception failure.
I think Mary Stopes and BPAS, the two major abortion clinic chains in this country, both say that almost half or over half of their clients have gotten pregnant as a result of contraception failure. Even today, I have girls that I've seen who will say to me about other girls, well, hasn't she heard of contraception? Even though they've gotten pregnant themselves as contraception has failed them. There's a general myth that contraception does work most of the time. But in fact, in practice, the contraception success rates outside of the laboratory in the real world don't bear much resemblance to the rates in the laboratory. I mean, the pill, for example, is supposed to be between 98 and 99% effective in preventing pregnancy. But of course, if you have a cold, if you have the flu, if you're on antibiotics, if you take epilepsy medication, and a host of other reasons can compromise the effectivity of a pill. Some pills don't work if they're taken too many hours after the other one, and so on. There's a number of reasons why the pill can fail, apart from the fact that any humanly made thing can sometimes fail. So contraception failure is a huge problem in leading to abortion. People often fail to see the link. I think when Pope Paul VI wrote Humanae Vitae, people will often argue that there is no link between abortion and contraception, and to choose to contracept is a completely different decision. But in the real world, when people have contraception easily available and they think it's almost 100% effective, they will take risks that they would never dream of taking in other circumstances. We see this with, the Muslim schoolgirl who's 16, gets given condoms in school by her school nurse because she's about to sleep with her boyfriend, would probably never have taken that risk if she hadn't been assured these would be safe. Coming back to the school nurse a month later to say she's pregnant, and the nurse saying, well, it does fail sometimes. Well, that failure sometimes is, a life and death matter to that girl now. Young single Muslim women are in the highest risk category for abortion because in their culture, going home and saying you're pregnant is unacceptable, and for most of them, they will have to choose between their baby and their family if they continue the pregnancy. Contraception failure also means, because women will take risks that they would never otherwise take without contraception, it means a host of situations where women would never have chosen to risk a pregnancy have now become common. We see everything from incest to many extramarital affairs and so on, where people would never have taken the risk of sleeping with this particular person if they really thought there was a strong possibility of pregnancy. And trying to deal with a pregnancy in those kind of situations can be extremely difficult. Practical problems, we see girls with a range of practical problems. Financial issues is not the biggest problem. I mean, however poor our welfare state is, we do have one, and for most people it will keep them off the street and it will keep food on their table, just about. So it's not the biggest issue here, but we do see a number of women who fall outside those guidelines, and I think it's something that charities and generally pro-life people that we're in contact with often don't really know these people exist almost. I mean, illegal immigrants obviously don't have rights to housing and benefits. Foreign students who come here legitimately but aren't working at the time when they get pregnant have no rights to benefits, housing, help to continue their studies. Foreign workers also, if they haven't been working long enough, may not be eligible for any form of benefits. And so we end up trying to house and feed these women because there is nowhere else for them to go. And even many other Christian charities won't actually be able to house these people or help them financially, because if their funding comes from the state, they often won't be allowed to help women who fall outside those women who are entitled to state help. There was a study done in 1998, but I think it's still very valid, about this issue of reaching abortion-minded women and how to get women who are considering abortion to listen to what the pro-life movement have to say. And I just want to read you a little bit about that study because I think it's still very relevant to the mindset of the women we see. So it starts off, the new research shows why the traditional approach to reaching these women has had so little effect and what can be done to change things. The summary report of the study bears the intriguing title, Abortion, the Least of Three Evils, Understanding the Psychological Dynamics of How Women Feel About Abortion. The report suggests that women do not see any good resulting from an unplanned pregnancy. Instead, they must weigh what they perceive as three evils, namely motherhood, adoption, and abortion. Unplanned motherhood, according to the study, represents a threat so great to the modern woman that it is perceived as an equivalent to a death of self. While the woman may rationally understand this is not her own literal death, her emotional, subconscious reaction to carrying the child to term is that her life will be over. This is because many young women of today have developed a self-identity that simply does not include being a mother. It may include going through college, getting a degree, obtaining a good job, even getting married someday. But the sudden intrusion is perceived as a complete loss of control over their present and future selves. It shatters their sense of who they are and will become, and thereby paralyzes their ability to think more rationally or realistically. When these women evaluate the abortion decision, therefore, they do not, as a pro-lifer might, formulate the problem with the radically distinct options of either I must endure an embarrassing pregnancy or I must destroy the life of an innocent child. Instead, their perception of the choice is either my life is over or the life of this new child is over. Given this perspective, the choice of abortion becomes one of self-preservation, a much more defensible position, both to the woman deciding to abort and those supporting her decision. Even those women who are likely to choose life rather than abortion do so not because they better understand fetology or have a greater love for children, but because they have a broader and less fragile sense of self, and they can better incorporate motherhood into their self-identity. Adoption, unfortunately, is seen as the most evil of the three options, as it is perceived as a kind of double death. First, the death of self, as the woman would have to accept motherhood by carrying the baby to term. Further, not only would the woman be a mother, but she would perceive herself as a bad mother, one who gave her own child away to strangers. The second death is the death of the child through abandonment. A woman worries about the chance of her child being abused. She's further haunted by the uncertainty of the child's future and about the possibility of the child returning to intrude on her own life many years later. Basically, a woman desperately wants a sense of resolution to her crisis, and in her mind, adoption leaves the situation the most unresolved, with uncertainty and guilt as far as she can see for herself and her child. As much as we might like to see the slogan, adoption, not abortion, embraced by women, this study suggests that in pitting adoption against abortion, adoption will be the hands-down loser. The attitude of these women towards abortion is quite surprising. First of all of the scores of the women involved in the study, none of whom were pro-life activists and all of whom called themselves pro-choice, agreed that abortion is killing. That's from a study, Abortion, a Failure to Communicate, by Paul Swope. I think it's a very important study, and it really describes the mindset of the women we see. Abortion is something that women cling to because they see it as giving immediate and permanent resolution to the crisis that they face at the moment. Women will often tell you that it's the best thing for their baby. Sometimes if there's anything wrong with the baby, they'll have been told the baby's in pain, the baby's suffering, that we should do this thing to relieve the baby's suffering. But sometimes they personally feel that with their own situation in life and how they're feeling at the moment about the pregnancy that they hadn't planned, that they won't love the baby, that they won't provide the best for the baby, and that in some way the abortion is a loving decision. If we don't understand what the mindset of the woman is, it's all very well we can think differently because we feel differently about the baby and we understand it's a human being from conception. But if we can't understand the mindset of the women that we're trying to reach, we can't reach them, and we also can't help to change their minds. So when they come in to us, there are several things that we want to achieve. Now, I'm not undermining what I've just said. I think that study is very important in looking at the mindset of the woman that we're facing. But I do think there are some points. It's not true to say that understanding the fetology of the baby or what will happen in the abortion are not going to be relevant to her decision at all. But I think it's also important to recognise that we have to build her up as a woman, build her up as someone capable of being a mother, and we have to understand what's going through her mind when we see her. But one of the things we find key to even discussing the abortion decision is a kind of examination of conscience. So when the woman comes to us, we want her to be asking herself some things by the time she's left. One is, what does it mean to be pregnant? And by that we mean, does she understand what she's carrying? Does she know the stage of her pregnancy? Does she know how developed her baby is? Does she know that this is a child and that she is already a mother? Secondly, what will abortion do to the baby? Does she understand physically what the abortion will do? Does she understand how it will be done? We see many women who've had previous abortions and they can't even tell you what method of abortion was used. They're given very little information, they're rushed through the decision, and often they don't really want to spend time thinking about what's actually taken place. But we think it's very important that they know physically how it will be done, and also factually what is taking place here, that the death of a child will take place. And thirdly, is that right or wrong? We have to get her thinking about this in terms of her own conscience and reawakening that conscience if it's been deadened on this issue, which I think many people's have, just by the constant battering of the media on abortion and contraception and sex outside marriage and everything around the whole issue of abortion, really. So if we can get her thinking about that, stimulating her conscience to start thinking, this is a child, its life will be taken, do I have a moral view on that? That's already important. Several years ago, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists gave the guidelines that women who are seeking abortion should receive verbal advice supported by accurate, impartial, printed information that the woman considering abortion can understand and may take away to consider further before the procedure. I would say that it's important to recognise that no such impartial information is given to these women. Often they receive very little information about the abortion procedure itself, and when they do, we have to bear in mind that the medical statistics that the Department of Health base their information on abortion on are statistics that are taken from women who have had abortions before the woman leaves the clinic. Since most abortion complications will occur after the woman leaves the clinic, that means there are no trustworthy statistics on the effects of abortion at all. I mean, most women who die following an abortion don't die immediately in the clinic. Most women who have long-term bleeding, who have hysterectomies, who have miscarriages or ectopic pregnancies, miscarriages and ectopic pregnancies in subsequent pregnancies will not be something that occurs before the woman leaves the abortion clinic. But if you look at the Department of Health's own statistics on abortion complications, they tell you clearly that they only include statistical information from women who have had problems before leaving the clinic. Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists also say appropriate information and support should be available for those who consider but do not proceed to abortion, something that we see all the time, because we also have 3 vigils in London where people are praying and offering help outside 3 of the clinics on a daily basis when they're open each day. We see many women coming out from abortion clinics, and we get to speak to many of them. Many of these women have been given no information about any alternative at all, and something we regularly do is ring the clinics and ring their hotlines and ask them, if I wanted to give my baby up for adoption, can you give me information on that? No, they can't. If I want to keep my baby, can you give me information on that? No, they can't. And they don't refer to pro-life organisations who could, so therefore they don't have anywhere really to send on women who need that kind of support. It's important to be able to offer the women the practical help that they need. So if that's financial, if it's a place to hide, we see a number of women who are fleeing domestic violence, for instance. They need somewhere to hide, and they need it now. And often there is nowhere for them to go. So pregnant women who are in those kind of situations are often forcibly sent in for abortion, sometimes the partner going with them. And in fact, we've seen many instances where the clinics have actually been aware of this and have facilitated it. Sometimes it's the girl's mother, sometimes it's her partner, sometimes it's an abuser. It happens all the time. I mean, one of the clinics that we're outside regularly in Twickenham has recently, the CQC report on them stated that when a woman has medical problems following the abortion, they're very slow to call in the emergency services. And we know that on several occasions during our vigils, at least on 1 or 2 occasions, the police have been called because somebody's clearly being forced to have an abortion, and the police have not intervened. The police will just ask the clinic, and the clinic will just agree, basically, to go ahead and perform the abortion, and they will fob the police off because, they just need to say to the police, oh, well, they're pro-life, they don't want anyone to have an abortion. But in fact, we're not in the habit of calling the police every 5 minutes to say that a woman is under extreme pressure. I would say every woman going in there is under pressure, but when you see a woman being forced to have an abortion and the police won't intervene, then you know things have gotten a little out of hand. We did actually have a situation in the Ealing clinic a couple of years ago where a girl went in to have an abortion under pressure from her parents, and she was talking to one of our staff outside and saying she was really unsure about this and she wasn't sure she wanted to do it. She went into the clinic and went into the toilet and started phoning our centre frantically, saying that she really didn't want to have the abortion. So in the end, we invited her to come in, leave the clinic and come in, but she was afraid to do so. So finally we called the police, and when the police came, they spoke to her and asked her what was going on, and she told them that she did feel a bit under pressure. So they distracted her parents while she bolted out the fire escape, jumped over the fence next door and ran across the park, jumped into a cab, came in and kept her baby. But this was a woman who had already taken the first pill, under pressure from her parents, and was under a great deal of pressure to just continue with that. And everyone, we were aware of it after speaking to her for 2 minutes at the gate. So I feel that it was perfectly plain to the staff inside the clinic. But the vast majority of women we see are being pressured or encouraged by either their boyfriend or the mother, most commonly the boyfriend, but their mum is also a very key person in the decision making. If we're not able to offer them the immediate practical help that they need, many women will go ahead and have an abortion. If there's a serious situation like that, they need to get out, and they need to get out now, and they need to know where they can go. If they need financial help, often we don't see that many women needing financial help, but when they do need it, it's often huge. They often have no housing. We see many women at even much later on in the pregnancy, 6 and 7 and 8 months of pregnancy, sleeping on the street. And we have to provide accommodation for them. That's not really what we're there for, actually. We're there aimed at women who are abortion-minded in the early weeks of pregnancy, when they can still have an abortion, who are being forced to have abortions and pressured by circumstances. But we end up housing women right up to 9 months of pregnancy because there's nowhere else for them to go. With the boyfriends, there are really 3 types of men that we see. First, the man who really wants her to keep the baby and offers her every kind of support. And of course, we love to see those men coming. And often, if the man is really supportive, the woman will keep the baby. That's why we only see a small number of couples where the man is dead set on her keeping the baby, because in the majority of cases, if the woman has his support, she will go ahead and keep the baby. So they wouldn't even be coming to us looking for abortion. The second type of man is the dead set on abortion. You are going to have this abortion come hell or high water. We don't see a huge number of them, but I would say probably 20 or 30% of the men we see are dead set on pushing the woman into abortion, some more forcefully than others. Physical threats. I've seen men running up huge phone bills on the woman's phone and refusing to pay it until she has the abortion, or withdrawing all contact from her until she has the abortion, and every kind of pressure can be exerted on the woman. And no one seems to mind, really. I mean, all kinds of threatening behaviour can go on and no one seems to be interested. The police aren't interested. This seems to be a kind of acceptable form of bullying. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago on the internet, there was an article going around how to persuade your girlfriend to have an abortion if she doesn't want to, from some men's blog or whatever. And this was kind of seen as acceptable amongst a certain group of men. Men don't get such a bad doing in our office. We've got lots of men working with us, and we know there's lots of good men out there. But we unfortunately see some of the worst end of men. But the biggest group of men are the ones who say, I'll support you whatever you do. I'll support you whatever you do because it's a woman's right to choose and blah, blah, blah. This is the kind of thing we see where feminism is really used against the woman. The last thing a woman needs when she's pregnant is for the man to turn around and say, I'll support you whatever you do, because I'll support you whatever you do means if you have the abortion and have our child torn to pieces, I totally support you. And if you have this baby, I really want it. No, there's something not right there, is there? I mean, if you had a 2-year-old child and your husband said to you, if you want to take him out in the garden, bash his brains out, I will totally support you. But if you want to raise him, I'll be there for you. No woman is going to feel very encouraged that the man really supports her. And that's exactly what happens. The woman instantly knows that the man does not want the baby, is not prepared to commit to the baby, and on top of that is loading the guilt onto her shoulders, whatever she does. If she keeps the baby, she's forced him to do to be there if he stays, because she's made the decision. If she aborts the baby, she's made the decision to do that, so she can never blame him, because he said, I'll support you whatever you do. So it's the most gutless and disgusting kind of approach, I feel. Sometimes men really genuinely do believe it's the woman's right to choose and they mustn't say anything to influence her, and having some male counsellors in the office can be really useful in those times, because actually even the women who are very set on abortion often don't really appreciate that. They see the man as very weak and they wish he would just say straight out what he wants. So it's often good to have a man-to-man talk, really, where the man can say to another man, look, come on, this is both of your children. You've got to have an opinion. And if you want her to have this baby, you need to speak up and say so. And also can give him a lot of information about, how developed his child is and what's really going on there. But those men are, I would say, the biggest cause of abortion, bigger even than the men who put pressure on, because sometimes when men put pressure on, the woman does finally flip and stand up to the man and get out of the relationship. But this, I'll support you whatever you do, is the cause of many, 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 many thousands of abortions each year. The mother is also a key person, because if the mother, even if she just feels it's a bad time for the woman to have a child, for her daughter to have a child, her rejection of the woman's motherhood, if the grandmother of the child is rejecting the mother as a mother of the child and rejecting the baby, her grandchild, that's how it can come across if she's pushing for the abortion anyway. It really undermines the woman's own confidence and her ability to go ahead in her decision. Some of the girls that we see have made amazing decisions in the face of all kinds of pressures. I think of one young Polish girl that I saw a few years ago, and her boyfriend he was much older than her, and he'd been through cancer and he was recovering, and he had grown-up children, and he couldn't be bothered with having this child now, and he put lots and lots and lots of pressure on her in every way, and she really wanted to keep the baby. She was phoning us every day, and we were phoning her and keeping in touch, because that friendship can be one of the most important things. Women really need allies when they're going through a pressurized pregnancy. And this girl suddenly, at one point, stopped calling us, turned off her phone for 24 hours, and then I got a phone call saying, I'm just so sorry, but he put me under so much pressure, I couldn't stand it. I've taken the first pill, I've had the abortion, I'm sorry. And so, I said I'd pray for her, and I hope that she would be able to forgive herself for what had happened, because she was feeling very guilty and so on. 2 weeks later, I was out having dinner, I suddenly get a call from the same girl. I pick up the phone and she said, I've just had a scan and I'm still pregnant. And in fact, she had taken the 2 abortion pills, the first stage and the second stage, which should have caused the abortion to happen. But she was still pregnant. Now everybody was at her. Her boyfriend was telling her the baby would be disabled. The doctors were telling her the baby would be disabled. But actually, this girl had a slight disability herself. It was a very minor thing, but something that she'd had all her life and something you could notice. And she felt that actually, no, she wasn't going to have this abortion, even if there was going to be something wrong with her baby. And she went on and had the baby under the most immense pressure. Of course, the man came around completely and supports her now. The baby actually had a heart defect, which the doctors assured her wasn't caused by the pill, but I think she'll go to her grave feeling that it was caused by the pill. And she had to have 3 operations in the first 5 years of her life, but she is now perfectly healthy, and her mother's very, very happy and grateful. In the middle of her pregnancy, after taking the pills, her mother even said to her, how can you bring a disabled baby into the world? And she said, Mum, how can you say that to me when you've done it yourself? And here I am, So the pressure women can come under is amazing, really. We had another case of a Muslim lady and her husband who were told there was something wrong with the baby. The baby had 3 holes in its heart. So I remember going on the Feast of St. Michael. We ended up in the scan room with her, and we were all saying the prayer to St. Michael for this baby. And the consultant came down, did a full colour imaging scan, and she said, no, she said, I can see why they thought that. There's some kind of slight kink there in the heart. They've thought that, but actually there's nothing wrong with the baby. The baby was born with 3 holes in his heart and went on to have a big operation in his first year, but is now perfectly well. We had 5 babies within the space of a couple of years that were either born on the feast of St. Michael, St. Raphael, or related in some way to those saints, and 5 of them were called some kind of derivative of the name of Raphael. So he's the patron saint of doctors and medical conditions. So I think there was some saintly influence going on there. We talked about the abortion in the case of rape earlier. I think Colin was talking about that. We see many women who have been raped, and I would say, in my experience, at least half of them they come to us because someone else has told them to have an abortion. They don't want abortion themselves. At least half of them, just straight off, before they've had any information, at least half of them want to keep their baby. You don't just become in favour of abortion because you've been raped. Women start looking for abortion because other people don't believe it was rape if they don't want to have an abortion. I've had a couple of cases where the police have threatened that they won't prosecute the rapist if the woman carries the pregnancy to term. And other people just don't believe, that it was rape if the woman wants to keep the baby, because in our society, it's just, that's what you do. You have an abortion if you get raped. Every raped woman wants an abortion, right? We all know this because this is thrown at us all the time. But in fact, at least half of women that we see start off not even considering abortion in the case of rape. We did have one woman who was raped by her employer, and after a lot of counselling and support, chose to keep her baby. But she wanted to have the baby and give it up for adoption. So she had the baby and she brought him to the adoption agency and signed all the papers. I think it was actually before he was born. Yes, she went to the adoption agency, signed up all the papers and filled in everything, said she wanted to give the baby up, and then sat on the adoption agency's steps all night waiting to take the papers back in the morning. And she kept her baby. But, there's a lot of pressure on women who've been raped. We've seen another woman who was also raped by an employer. This is something that happens a lot to illegal immigrants for obvious reasons. They come in unscrupulous employers who will pay them cash in hand but often take advantage in many ways. And in this case, she decided to keep the baby, and her husband actually accepted the child, and they found they weren't able to have children together. So this is their only child, and a very loved child as well. We see women who have also been through all kinds of things in their lifetime. I mean, one of the women that we met outside one of the central London abortion clinics had been through 6 pregnancy losses at the age of 23 when we met her. 4 of them were abortions and 2 were miscarriages, and she was pregnant again. And she started off by shouting at one of our staff in the street for 20 minutes, but she was obviously very upset, and eventually he put her on the phone to me and he was saying, I can't speak to her, she's just shouting at me, but she really wanted to speak to someone. And she said, can I speak to someone unbiased? And I said, well, I don't think that person really exists, but if you come in, I'll just try and listen and not try and influence you at all, because I could see she was so stressed that she really, you could even tell on the phone that actually a big part of her wanted to keep the baby. And of course, when she came in and was just given free space to let off all this steam and find out what help was there, she opened up completely and kept her baby. But she later sat down and added up that in her own family there had been about, just between herself, 2 sisters and her mum, there had been about 10 abortions. And this is where people are coming from, a lot of woundedness, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and a fear of carrying the pregnancy to term, which was her big thing. After her baby was born, she told me that even after coming to us for help, she continued to go to various abortion clinics at least each week. And eventually they were telling her, go away, you're getting too far along now and you're not really in the health that we would consider doing an abortion, in fact, because she had some health issues. And but throughout the pregnancy, she was tormented by the fear of coping with this baby. I think something that we have to recognise, there's a lot of important things we have to do to change our society. Political activism is one of them. Challenging things that are being brought into law is one of them. But actually, the care of these women is the biggest witness we have to what we do. And if we really want to change society, we have to be reaching out to these women at whatever cost to ourselves and offering them alternatives, because actually without that the pro-life movement is completely hollow unless we can show that we're actually putting our money where our mouth is and putting our time and effort where our mouth is. Our arguments are completely hollow. I think one of the things that struck me about Colin's talk was that, one of the things that changed Alison's mind about her will to live was being cared for and being looked after in a loving way. And I think I see that all the time with the women that we see. Unless we can actually reach them and impact them by showing them that we care about them and walk alongside of them in these difficult situations, we can't change their mind, even if we give them the truth sometimes. At the moment, I'm trying to assist a woman who has no amniotic fluid left in the womb. This is a condition where her baby is extremely likely to die. And if the baby does survive, he's likely to be injured quite severely in the womb before he's born. And the only option she's been offered by her hospital is abortion. And she's being offered it every week when she goes in to see the doctors. And every time she asks, can I have the baby induced? Is there anything else that can be done? They just say no, and they're giving her no information. So we're trying to get her some good medical advice as well. But we can see for her, even with the best medical advice in the world, there's a very strong possibility her baby's going to die. She knows that, and she wants to give her baby every chance and respect his life till the end. So in some cases, all we can really do is walk alongside of that woman and be Christ to her in the best way that we can. What happens when women do abort? So we put women in touch with retreats and one-to-one counselling that they can try and forgive themselves and accept God's forgiveness in their life. This is very important, because if a woman doesn't manage to repent of an abortion and get help to forgive herself, she's much more likely to choose abortion again, because if she feels like, I've done this already, I've already taken the life of one child, then it becomes much easier to just go through that again than to face up to having the child and recognising every day what you've lost in the previous pregnancy. So this is why second abortions are becoming more and more common. We can see that our culture is really scarred by the trauma of abortion. I mean, there's lots of imagery in rock music particularly now that you'll see of landscapes of babies everywhere, quite horrific ones. I've seen this quite a lot on album covers and so on. I think there's this whole thing out there of the culture of the lost child. You see it sometimes in things on the telly. I don't know if you've seen any of these programs that have been on over the last few years about fetus theft, which is a crime where a woman will slit open the stomach of a pregnant woman, deliver her child and steal the child. I mean, it's so bizarre, you can't believe it's happening. But in several of those cases, it's been found that the woman committing the crime has had a previous abortion. There was a case of a woman called Lucinda Bobbitt, quite a famous case, where she cut off some part of her husband's anatomy during the night because he'd been having an affair. But it later came out, when she was asked in court why she did it, the first thing she said was, because he forced me to have an abortion. So the idea that women are walking around after abortion and they're all fine is a nonsense. None of us are fine if we have to go through the loss of a child, full stop, let alone if we have to consent to it. I think any woman who's been through an ectopic pregnancy or any form of miscarriage will tell you that, let alone abortion, where you often have to live with your decision before and afterwards for days or weeks. Women often feel when they're having an abortion, most abortions happen between 6 and 10 weeks. And I think if you haven't been planning to be pregnant, if you're not a super baby-oriented person, for example, a lot of women at that stage won't necessarily feel any bond with their baby. However, what you feel and what's real are two different things sometimes. And when you're seeing these women for counselling, maybe 10 or 20 years after their abortion, they're very aware of the bond with their baby. Suddenly they want to know who their baby is. Was it a boy? Was it a girl? And often in their gut instinct, they will know whether it was a boy or a girl. Sometimes they will have named their baby. Sometimes we'll meet women seeking abortion who've been talking to their baby and asking their baby to forgive them. I think on several occasions, different counsellors have reported to me that they've met a woman outside an abortion clinic who's got tattooed somewhere on her the date of her last abortion, the date the baby was aborted, because she never wants to forget that child. In post-abortion counselling, you'll often find women have kept the receipt from their abortion or other paperwork because it's the only form of birth certificate that they have for their child. It's the only proof that that child existed. And these are the normal ways that people try to deal with the loss of somebody, aren't they? You keep keepsakes, you remember the date, you remember the place, you remember by having some kind of memorial. Women who have abortion have all those things taken away for them. So they try and make them in some other shadow of what that would be like. So keeping your receipt is one way of keeping some documentary evidence of your babies coming into life. Another nice thing that we see is that the very simple, tacky blue leaflets that we give out outside the clinic, which detail the development of the baby and the help that's available, often do get taken by women who go on and have the abortion, but will keep that leaflet for maybe the next 5 or 6 or 7 years and will use it themselves when they're pregnant again to seek help, or they'll pass it on to someone else to get help for them. And the number of women who will say, I swore that day I would never do this again, and they've kept your leaflet, gives you some hope that actually, even if today you haven't made that impact on the woman's life, a life may still be saved as a result of what we're doing. What happens when counselling is effective? Well, about 70% of the women we see will choose life for their children. To be honest with you, for the vast majority of them, once they've chosen to keep their baby, the help they need is little or nothing. The vast majority of women don't even necessarily want to receive help or support after they've decided to keep the baby, because what happens is they keep the baby, they tell everyone they're going to keep the baby. Eventually it becomes beyond the pale for people to keep pressuring them to have an abortion. So they go home, they keep their baby, the baby's born, the baby's a member of everyone's family then. Suddenly everyone feels differently. Nobody wants to remember that they were the one pushing her to have the abortion. So for the vast majority of women, once they make that decision and they go home and stick their neck on the line and say they're keeping the baby, things will come right in time. We're always there if they have ongoing issues, or if, women often come back to us 4 or 5 years later and say, oh, this has happened, I need a bit of financial help or whatever. We're still there and they know we're there. We're still in contact with some girls that we've seen. The eldest child I'm still in contact with is now 18, so it's always a blessing to see that they're not just babies, but they do grow up and become real people. Not that they're not real people when they're babies, but that's what we get told all the time, isn't it? We're just interested in the baby. So it's nice to see that these babies are real people, and they grow up into adults and go on to be pro-life, hopefully themselves as well. Nothing affects a young woman's life, for example, as much as being told that she was nearly aborted herself. So I think that does make an impact on a lot of people's view of abortion. We've seen in London a drop in the abortion figures at last. It's really started over the last 10 years or so. Prior to that, the abortion figures were going up and up and up. But we've gradually begun to see a drop. And we know that several of the clinics that we're regularly outside, the abortion statistics have gone down. For example, the Ealing Mary Stopes clinic that we've been outside now for the last few years, in 2013 had 9,979 abortions. In 2014, it had 8,353 abortions. The Mary Stopes at Whitfield Street in 2013 had 3,637 abortions. In 2014, it had 2,086 abortions. So that's nearly 3,000 drop just between those two clinics. But Mary Stopes and BPAS are trying to make up for this by opening more and more clinics, particularly Mary Stopes. In London, we've gone from having 6 major abortion clinics to having 24 centres where women can go for a consultation or an abortion. I think about 19 of them are actual abortion clinics. So even despite that, though, the overall numbers are falling. So Mary Stopes and BPAS, how they've dealt with the fall in the numbers is to try and get a bigger and bigger share of the NHS market of abortions, and they have done that very, very successfully. But even with that, their numbers in London are falling. That's why they hate what we do, and they hate the vigils, and they hate anything that's dissuading women from having abortions. So I think it's really important to think about what you can do on a local level to affect abortion. We started off setting up centres all over the country, and some worked well for a time and some really grew and others closed, and we began to think, are we really capable of supporting this, and do we have the infrastructure to keep this going, or do we need to look at what we can do on a local level? And we've really tried to actually concentrate on our own area, do the best we can do in London to reach as many abortion-minded women as possible, reach out to the abortion centres where abortions are happening in large numbers and try and impact them. With the work that we do, and also 40 Days for Life, we've seen Bedford Square, one of BPAS's flagship clinics, close. We've seen several clinics in the last 2 or 3 years reduce their opening hours more and more and more. We see this movement to have little clinics all over London as a desperate strategy to try and put up numbers where they're obviously falling. And I think the tide is really beginning to turn, because the population of London is going up, not down. It's gone up considerably in the years that the abortion figures have fallen. So although it's a tiny drop in the ocean, really, the numbers that we're seeing dropping, we should be hopeful, and we should feel that if we're willing to go out and put our neck on the line, abortion will gradually be defeated. I think the key things are do what you can do in your own area. If you can leaflet in your area for SPUC, great, do that. If you can help with your local pregnancy centre, do that. But find out that they're actually doing something. I think a lot of pregnancy centres are seeing no one, and to make up for this, they're offering help to abortion, post-abortive women and so on, which is great work. But there needs to be an approach to abortion-minded women in your area. If there isn't one, why aren't you doing something about it? If these women have nowhere to go, of course they're going to have an abortion. And if we know the truth about abortion, we're going to be answerable for why there's nothing happening there. You don't need an empire. You know, people often say, oh, well, you've got a great big centre. And we started in someone's living room, one of us, just offering what help we could offer. You don't have to be nice. I'm not. You don't have to be organised. I'm not. You don't have to be anything. You just have to do what you can do. I mean, for goodness sake, if you're not nice, at least you'll have something good to offer when you die that you've done, if nothing else. So I think, this is a really good work. It means you don't have to go with your hands empty. And you just do the best you can. Do something. Reach one woman. Mother Teresa is so often quoted as saying, we're not called to be successful, we're just called to be faithful. And I think if she knew how that was going to be twisted by people in the pro-life movement after her death, she wouldn't have said it. And by that I mean, when we're saying to people, look, we have to be reaching abortion-minded women, we have to be at the vigils outside the clinics. People say to us, oh, I'm not called to be successful, I'm called to be faithful. Okay, we're called to be faithful, as in we may not see the end of abortion in our country, but we are called to look for the most effective means that we can use. We might not be able to make a huge impact, but we should do the most effective thing we can do in terms of turning women around away from abortion. That one-to-one approach will change our society as much as big campaigns to end abortion will, because every baby saved affects dozens of lives, not just one or two. That girl I mentioned who had 10 abortions within her family, they were in crisis mode over this baby. They were all head over heels in love with this baby, but it brought everybody's abortion to the surface, and they were all looking for help and counselling by the end of it. So don't tell me that changing one woman's decision doesn't change society. If you look at the great saints, they often change society by starting schools and caring for people in hospitals, and they change the whole culture by those works. There's no reason why any of us can't go out on a local level and reach out to the people nearest us. The other thing Mother Teresa said was, if you can't help the whole world, help the person next to you first. So that's something we can all do. We can make an outreach. Anyone can stand outside a clinic with a leaflet. If you're the sort of person who puts your foot in your mouth, you don't even have to say anything. Just hand her the leaflet. But, we can all do these works. And I'm really asking you to pray about it and think about what way you're called to be involved in turning our culture back to what it should be, a culture of life. Thank you.